You wake up and you don't know what hurts more, your body or the silence. There's smoke somewhere behind you, the smell of jet fuel and pine and something else you don't want to think about. Your seatbelt is still buckled. The seat itself is 30 feet from anything that used to be a plane. You sit there for a moment and do the thing that survivors always do first, before the panic, before the grief, before anything rational kicks in. You count yourself. 2 arms, 2 legs, blood on your forehead, but your vision is clear. Something wrong with your left shoulder, but it moves. You are alive. You look around at the wreckage and you think, I am the luckiest person who has ever lived. That thought lasts about 6 hours. Because 6 hours from now, you are going to find something in the wreckage that reframes every single thing that just happened to you. And luck is going to be the last word you use. Level 1, the flight. Let's go back to the beginning. 14 hours ago, you boarded a regional charter flight. Not a commercial airline, a private charter, the kind that small resource companies use to move contractors between remote sites. 19 seats. 11 passengers. You were seat 7C. You didn't want to take this flight. The contract you were there for, a geological survey job in the northern interior, had already been extended twice. You'd been away from home for 3 weeks longer than planned. You told your project manager you were done, you were going commercial, you'd find your own way to the nearest city. He talked you into the charter. Faster, he said. Direct, he said. Be home by tonight, he said. There were 11 of you on that plane. You need to sit with that number for a moment. 11 people. You need to think about how many of them you can account for right now, standing in this clearing. The answer is 1. Level 2, the first hours. Survival training is a funny thing. You took a 2-day course 4 years ago as part of a contractor certification. You remember maybe 40% of it. But 40%, it turns out, is enough to keep you moving when your brain wants to shut down. Shelter, water, signal. In that order. You find a section of fuselage that's intact enough to block the wind. You locate a stream about 200 meters from the crash site, running water, which means it's probably clean enough if you have no other choice. You find a first aid kit in the debris that is miraculously mostly intact. You treat your shoulder. Dislocated, not broken. You've seen it done before. You do it yourself in the time it takes to scream once and breathe 5 times. Then you do the thing you've been avoiding. You search for the others. You find 3 of them in the first hour. None of them are alive. You mark the locations. You don't move them. You go back to the fuselage and you sit down and you give yourself exactly 10 minutes to fall apart. Then you get up. Because there's something else you've found that you haven't processed yet. Level 3. The thing in the wreckage. It's a bag. Not luggage. Not a carry-on or a duffel or anything passengers would bring. It's a hard-shell case, the kind used for equipment. Black. Roughly the size of a large briefcase. Combination locked. You almost walked past it. The only reason you didn't is because it was strapped with heavy nylon webbing, to the inside of the rear cargo bulkhead. Not loaded. Not stowed. Secured. Deliberately. By someone who knew that, in the event of impact, they wanted this case to stay in place. You try the lock. For digits. You don't know the combination. You look at the case for a long time. Then you look at the plane around you. This is a 19-seat regional charter. It's not a cargo flight. It has no reason to have secured equipment in the rear. And it has no reason for that equipment to be locked. You pick up the case. It's heavy. Not electronics heavy. Dense heavy. The kind of weight that sits flat and solid like the weight of something that doesn't move. You put it back down. You think about your project manager who convinced you to take this flight. You think about the route, which, now that you try to remember it, cut over a section of territory you'd heard mentioned in conversations you weren't supposed to be part of. You think about the 11 people on this plane. And for the first time, the word accident starts to feel like the wrong word. Level 4. What you piece together. Your phone has no signal. But it has power. And it has your notes app. You sit in the fuselage and you start writing down everything you can remember. The charter company, you'd never used them before. Your project manager booked it, handled all the arrangements. When you arrived at the airfield, 2 of the other passengers were already there and they weren't contractors. You remember thinking it, they had no gear, no site equipment, Nothing you'd expect from people heading to a remote work location. One of them was reading a book. The other was on his phone the entire time and put it away the moment the pilot announced boarding. The pilot. You only saw him once. Brief, professional, no small talk. But you remember something now that you didn't register at the time. He looked at your boarding pass for slightly too long. The way someone looks at a document when they're confirming something specific, not just checking a name. And then there's the flight path. About 40 minutes in, the plane banked hard left. Not turbulence, a deliberate turn. You looked out the window and the geography didn't match the route you'd been told. You almost said something and then the person next to you started talking and you let it go. You write all of this down. Then you sit back and look at what you've written. And the shape of it is, somebody planned for this plane to go down. The case was secured for impact survival. The route was altered. And you, specifically you, weren't supposed to be on this flight until your project manager made 3 separate phone calls convincing you to take it. Level 5, the radio. On the second day, you find the cockpit. It came down further from the main wreckage than you expected. Nearly 400 meters northeast, partially buried in a ravine. The pilot didn't make it, but the emergency locator transmitter is still attached to the bulkhead, and it's blinking, which means someone knows where this plane went down, which means someone is choosing not to come. You also find something else in the cockpit. The flight recorder, the kind of basic unit these smaller charter aircraft carry, is cracked but intact. You can't play it, but you can see the external data port. And you have a field laptop in your kit, the one you use for geological surveys, with enough adapter cables that you've solved more unlikely technical problems than this. Takes you 3 hours. But you get it open. You put your earbuds in and you listen. The last 4 minutes of that cockpit audio will live in you for the rest of your life. You're not going to hear a mechanical failure. You're not going to hear a weather emergency. You're going to hear the pilot's voice, calm, professional, almost gentle, reading out a sequence of coordinates to someone on the other end of a radio channel that doesn't appear anywhere in the official flight manifest. And then you're going to hear a second voice confirm receipt. And then you're going to hear the pilot say, clearly without emotion, package is secure, initiating. 18 seconds of silence. Then the sound of an aircraft in freefall. Level 6, the moral architecture. Stop. Because here is where it stops being a survival story and starts being something harder. You are alive. You have evidence, audio evidence, of what sounds like a deliberate act that killed at least 3 people you can confirm and possibly 8 more. You have a locked case that someone secured specifically to survive this crash. And you have the creeping, unshakable understanding that whoever planned this does not yet know there's a survivor. The locator is blinking. They know where the wreck is. They are, you have to assume, coming for the case. Not for you. For the case. Which means you have a window. And inside that window you have choices. You can stay with the locator and flag down whoever comes, rescue or otherwise, and hope that your survival makes you untouchable. That they won't simply solve the problem of a witness by making the wilderness a little larger. You can take the case and the recorder and run. Into terrain you don't know, with supplies that won't last more than 3 more days, hoping to reach something. A road, a settlement, a signal, before either the elements or whoever is coming finds you first. You can destroy the recorder. Leave the case. Walk out as a simple survivor of a terrible accident. You didn't hear anything. You don't know anything. You grieve with everyone else and you go home. Or you can do something that terrifies you more than any of the above. You can break open the case. Because whatever is inside it is the only leverage you have. And leverage, right now, is the only thing standing between you and a very tidy, very permanent solution to the problem of a witness. Level 7, what's in the case? You break it open. Takes 40 minutes, a rock, and what's left of a seat frame used as a lever. The lock gives with a sound like a gunshot in the silence of the forest. Inside, a hard drive, 3 of them actually sealed in anti-static foam. And beneath them, a physical folder paper printed in a format you recognize because you've seen government documents before on project sites, and these have the same watermark structure, the same header format, the same density of redaction boxes. Except these aren't redacted. You read for 2 hours. You're not going to understand all of it. But you're going to understand enough. The hard drives contain something that multiple parties, at least 2 governments and 1 private entity you recognize by its registered trademark, have been trying to either obtain or destroy for the better part of 4 years. The documents describe it in terms that are deliberately vague, but the operational summary at the back is plain enough. This data, in the wrong hands or the right ones depending on who you ask, is capable of exposing an arrangement that would not survive public knowledge. The plane wasn't down to kill the passengers. The passengers were incidental. The plane was down to move the case through a jurisdiction without documentation, using a crash site as a dead drop. Someone on the ground was supposed to reach the wreck before any official response and retrieve it. You were never supposed to exist after the crash. Not because you knew anything. Simply because witnesses, even accidental ones, are a variable. And this operation has no tolerance for variables. Level 8, Day 3. It's the morning of Day 3. The locator is still blinking. You've made your choice, or rather, you've made the only choice that gives you any real control over what happens next. You've copied as much of the document summary as you can into your Notes app, photographing each page with your phone camera. You've wrapped the hard drives in your thermal layer and put them in your pack. You've taken the documents, and you've started walking, not toward rescue, away from it, northeast, away from the locator, toward the higher ground where your geological survey maps tell you there's a service road used by forestry operations roughly 22 kilometers out. 22 kilometers in this terrain with this pack, with this shoulder, is 3 days minimum. You have 2 days of water and 1.5 of food. But here is what you also have. You have evidence of a deliberate crash that killed 10 people. You have documentation of an operation that connects at least 2 governments to an act that, if the summary you read is accurate, would qualify under about 4 different international frameworks as something that cannot be quietly buried. You have a name, one name, visible on a single document header that you recognize. A name you've seen in news coverage. A name that, if you can get it to the right journalist, the right investigator, the right anyone, becomes a thread that unravels something much larger than a plane crash in the northern wilderness. You have 22 kilometers and 2 days of water. You start walking. Closing the question. Here's where we leave you. 22 kilometers from a road. 3 days of wilderness between you and anyone who isn't already looking for you for the wrong reasons. A phone full of photographs of documents that could change things, or get you erased before you reach the treeline. You didn't sign up for any of this. You took a charter flight home. You wanted to eat a meal in your own kitchen and sleep in your own bed. You were done. You were going home. And now you're carrying something that 10 people died for, 9 of them without ever knowing what they were sitting next to. So here is the question. Not can you survive the 22 kilometers, that's a logistics problem and you're good at those. The real question is, when you get out, if you get out, what do you do with what you're carrying? Do you go to authorities you can no longer fully trust? Do you go to press with a story so large and so dangerous that the moment you tell it, you become the story? Do you find a way to quietly disappear and let whatever this is continue without you? Or do you decide that 10 people died next to you on a Tuesday afternoon and that matters enough to burn everything down to make sure it doesn't get buried with them? What would you do? Drop it below. Because the wilderness part is survivable. It's what comes after that kills you.